So today we have our very own Sarah Allen, who is our in-house DNA expert. And we are so happy that she has been working on DNA since it basically started. And she has been digging in, learning everything that she can, so then she can teach us. And I mean us, all of us. So thank you for joining us. Sarah, if you want to go ahead and share your screen and we can get started.
Well, as Allison said, welcome everyone. Tonight, we're going to talk about what happens when your DNA results come in. What do they mean? Okay, so specifically, we're going to talk about autosomal DNA. So autosomal DNA is offered by 4 major testing companies. And this is the test that you've probably heard of. So Ancestry DNA offers it, Family Tree DNA offers a family finder test, MyHeritage DNA, 23andMe. And then there are also some smaller companies that also offer this test, Living DNA being one of them. So what is autosomal DNA, since I threw out that word, autosomal? Well, basically, without getting too technical, you have 22 pair of chromosomes that are called autosomes. And so the autosomal DNA test is going to look at those 22 pair of chromosomes. And you get, so they're pairs. So one chromosome in each pair is from the father and one is from your mother. And your autosomal DNA is inherited 50% from each parent. And here's a nice diagram that kind of shows you, demonstrates what I just said. So on the left, you've got the person that's going to take the DNA test, and it could be a male or a female. So anyone can take an autosomal DNA test, which is one of the reasons why people take it. It's very accessible and fairly inexpensive as well. And then you can see that the father and the mother of that person are listed there, and you are going to get 50% of your DNA from each of your parents. And it's exactly 50%. You can't have 51% from one parent and 49% from another parent. It doesn't work that way. And you're getting their DNA from the sperm and the egg. But then if you go back another generation, you can see that you have 4 grandparents. And so you can only share about 25% with each grandparent. And that can be uneven. So you could inherit 19% from one grandparent and 30% from another one. I mean, it can be a little bit variable. And then the next generation that you go back, you have 8 great grandparents. And so you will have approximately 12.5% from the great grandparents. And so on. And you can keep going back the generations. And you can see that you inherit less and less DNA from those ancestors. And by the time you get to your 5th and your 6th and your 7th great grandparents and your 8th great grandparents, you're really inheriting such a small amount of DNA from those people that it's not really going to be measurable on this test. You still have a little bit of DNA from them. That's not, what I'm saying. I'm just saying the autosomal DNA test becomes less useful when you only have a tiny amount of DNA from a very distant ancestor. So when you get your autosomal DNA test results back, you will have 2 major sections of your results. And the first section would be your ethnicity estimate. And the second would be your DNA genetic cousin matches, who are basically people who share at least one common ancestor with you. And these genetic cousin matches could be close relatives, or they could be as far distant as 5th to 8th cousins. So let's look very briefly at the ethnicity estimate. So we're going to go through the 4 major companies is basically what we're going to do tonight, and show you a little bit from each of those companies' website. And these are going to be my DNA results. So you'll get up close and personal with my DNA. So this is Ancestry DNA, and this is your my ethnicity result, which they call your DNA story. So when you see DNA story at Ancestry, you'll know that that's the ethnicity results. And you can see that you have a map over on the left-hand side, and on the right, you have the list of the ethnicity estimate, basically, that I have. And most of the things on this map are very clickable, and each of the websites is similar in that way, that there are things to click on. There are there's things you can scroll down and look at. There are buttons that say next screen, and you want to make sure that you hit the button that says next screen, and so forth, because there's a lot there. Most of the sites have fairly good help screens as well. So if you're on a screen, you don't know what it means, there's usually a question mark, or maybe the word help or learn more, something like that. And you can click on that and figure out what is going on. So you want to be sure that you do that. This is Ancestries, like I said, and we'll go on to the next one, which is MyHeritage. And you can see it's very similar. It has the same map of the world with some shading indicating where my ethnicity supposedly came from. And on MyHeritage, it is called actually your ethnicity estimate. So you can see that at the top there, the top middle. So that's what you should be looking at. And you can see that over on the left, it shows my particular results. The next company is 23andMe. And again, we have a map and we have the list of ethnicities. And on 23andMe, it's called your ancestry composition. So that is what the ethnicity estimate is called at 23andMe. And finally, there's Family Tree DNA, which calls it My Origins. So My Origins means ethnicity estimate at Family Tree DNA. So as you can see, they're all presenting you the results in approximately the same fashion, with a map and with a list of ethnicities. And then there's various explanations and buttons that you can press to learn more. And you want to do that, especially if you do have questions about your ethnicity estimate. Now, I got a kick out of making this slide. Ethnicity estimates explained in one slide. You could give a whole program on the ethnicity estimate, and I have done that. And actually, we had a speaker last month who gave a whole program on the ethnicity estimate. And that's why I'm kind of giving it a shorter shrift tonight, because we just had a program on it. But in one slide, what can we say? Well, we could say, first of all, that the word estimate is key. So you never want to look at this as your precise, exact ethnicity based on your background and your ancestors. It's just, the technology is just not there. So the companies are doing the best they can to give you a pretty reasonable estimate. And they're also trying to make it better. So each company updates your results frequently. I think Ancestry updates the results once a year, perhaps even more often. And some of the other companies are maybe on a 2-year or 3-year update schedule. But they do update these results regularly. So if you haven't checked with your ethnicity results in a while, I would go back and look at it, because it may have changed. And this is when the companies develop new technology, or they have come up with a way to make it more precise. Now, it's still not there yet. It's still not exact. It's still not precise to the point where, you know, you look at it and you say, oh yeah, that's what it is. But mine do get better as time goes on. They're not as general as they once were, and they're not as off base as they once were. So, but you do know that, you know, if they keep updating it, that, you know, the previous ethnicity estimate must have been less than great because they felt the need to update it. So they're updating everyone's, but they update everyone's ethnicity estimate at the same time usually, but yeah, they're tweaking it. And if you have tested at more than one company, you will notice if you compare your results based on, Ancestry's ethnicity estimate versus MyHeritage, you will see differences. And you'll say, how can that be? Because I'm the same person. I submitted my DNA to both those companies, but why would one company say I'm this and the other company say I'm that? Well, they all have their own proprietary way that they compute the ethnicity estimate. It's similar. I'm sure that the methods that they use are similar, but they're not exactly the same method. And because they're competitors, they're not going to tell us exactly how it is that they do it. They give us some information, certainly, but not all the information. So they each compute it a little differently. They each have a little bit different setup. You saw that when we were looking at the results. And they have different database sizes and different reference populations. And the reference population is what they're actually comparing you to. So they have some people in their reference population that are basically people from Ireland, for instance, people who have lived in Ireland for generations and can prove that they're by their tree, their family tree, that they are Irish. And so they serve as the reference population for Ireland. And our DNA is then compared against all these different reference populations to see if we're Irish, or see if we're Scottish, or see if we're African, and what exact tribe we're from in Africa, and that kind of thing. So each company has slightly different reference populations as well. So that just means that when you see your results from the different companies, they're going to be different as well. They're going to be slightly different. You also want to make sure that you're not thinking about it as political boundaries. And some of the companies have erred on this side. They have listed on your ethnicity estimate the names of modern day countries. And so this makes people think that this is saying that, you're German from Germany. And so people go and they look up on the map and they say, oh, well, there's Germany. And so I must be from there because the ethnicity estimate says that I'm German. That's not what it's really telling you. It's telling you that you're from a Germanic people group. So it's more about historical people groups that settled those areas hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago. And that's really what it's doing. And then they're trying to make that compute to those of us who are thinking about it in modern political boundaries. And so it can confuse people, but it's really looking at really historical people groups instead of the modern political boundaries. And your continent and your regional level should be more accurate. So there are a couple companies that give you regions, like they'll say Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Northern Europe, Southern Europe. And those tend to be a lot more accurate because the DNA companies can better easily tell what region of the continent that you're from. Look to your regional level to be pretty accurate. So here's my known ethnicity estimate, my known ethnicity. And I got this from my family information, from talking to family members, and from my genealogical research. So I found, genealogical records that show where my family seems to be from. So I expected myself to be about 50% English from England, 12.5% Irish and Scots or Celtic, 12.5% French and Germanic, and 25% Eastern European. Now, keep that in mind that I should be English, Irish and Scots, French and Germanic, and Eastern Europe. So here's my 4 ethnicity estimates from each of the different companies. And when you look at them at first, you might think, gosh, they're not very similar. But if you look for Eastern European on all of them, it's there. A couple companies, the company on, I think that's MyHeritage on the bottom left, doesn't have an Eastern European category that I fit in, but they called me Balkan. And so Balkan, and Balkans are in Southeastern Europe. And so that is kind of the category that MyHeritage is using that I fall into. And you can see that they all say that I'm part English, and they all say that I'm part Irish, and they all say I'm part French and German. Well, no, wait a minute, hold on. Two of them say I'm Germanic. One of them says I'm French and German. One of them says I have some Central European in me, and I think that that's what they're calling German. And then one of them says North and Western European, which I think German's going to fit in there. So all in all, it looks fine to me. There's a few small anomalies that are a little weird, but basically it fits into the regional categories that I think that my DNA should fit into. But there are differences, and you can see them clearly on the screen. And yours will look the same way if you do this, if you put your ethnicity estimates side by side from the different companies. So your bottom line is that there's a couple situations where you might want to consult a DNA expert if you have a really far out result. And one of those would be if you have a significant ethnicity from a different continent than expected. So I expected to be 100% European, but if for some reason my ethnicity estimate said that I was 10% Native American or 5% Asian, that would be a significant ethnicity from a totally different continent. And I would want to know like where that came from and how that happened, because that's not part of my family history. It's not part of my family tree research that I found. So if something like that happens to you, that's something that you should probably look into, especially if you find it very intriguing, like I would. And the other thing would be Jewish DNA. Jewish DNA is very distinct. And so it can be categorized by these testing companies. So if you have an unexpected Jewish result, you should look into that as well. If you thought that you were 100% Jewish and you turn out that you're not 100% Jewish, or if you thought you were 100% non-Jewish, but you get a Jewish ethnicity estimate in your results. Those are things that you also should probably look into if you're at all curious, because you might be able to figure out how that came into your tree. Otherwise, if the regional predictions are fairly accurate, I would say enjoy the results, learn about the different people groups involved by clicking on all of those different options, the buttons, the learn more on the websites there, and don't sweat the small differences in your ethnicity estimates or what you know about your family. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the DNA cousin matches, which is the second part of your autosomal DNA results. So these genetic cousin matches, how can they be cousins with you? Well, they have to descend from a common ancestor or common ancestors that you both share. They could be close family or distant 5th to 8th cousins. And I should mention that there's a small percentage of 5th to 8th cousins that you may not ever be able to find a connection with, no matter how hard you try. Because some of the 5th to 8th cousins, you may just be sharing DNA with them because you're from the same area in the world. And everybody from that area happens to share a tiny bit of DNA, and it shows up on this test results that you're cousins, but it's not going to be traceable back to a common ancestor. So that is a possibility with the 5th to 8th cousins. So the page that shows your DNA cousin matches is going to give you a relationship label. And that is an estimated relationship. It's not telling you that you're exactly first cousins with somebody. It's telling you that you're approximately a first cousin with them, and there could be other relationships. So you need to figure out the actual relationship. And you can do that by communicating with your DNA matches, sharing information. You can do it by viewing each other's trees, if they have a tree. And you can do it by genealogical research. So here's my DNA matches at one of the sites. And you can see at the top, it does say that DA is my father. That is one of the few relationship labels that will be absolutely accurate. If it tells you that someone is your father, or it says it, more likely it's going to say parent-child. And that means that that person absolutely has to be your parent or your child. There's no other way around it. But the other people you can see are first to second cousins. And so the matches that I'm showing you here, they're not my first cousin exactly. They're not my second cousin exactly. I have to figure out who they are to me. And I have blacked out the names of these matches. And in some cases, I have changed the names of matches. So I'm not giving the information about living people who have not given me permission to talk about their DNA. So people do run into surprises when they take the autosomal DNA test. And some of the most common surprises that people have run across are people that have discovered an unknown half sibling. People have discovered relatives that were put up for adoption by other family members, and other types of family secrets. And quite a few people discover that their known father, the man that raised them, or the man that they were told was their father, was not actually their biological father. So if you run into a surprise like this and you need help interpreting what it means, be sure to reach out to a DNA expert. And I know people that have been devastated by learning, for instance, that the father that they thought was their father was not their actual biological father. So if that has happened to you, please try to reach out to a professional if this has really, overturned your life and causing you grief and pain. Okay, so how can you get started learning more about your DNA matches? Well, these are what I would consider some beginner steps, and I'm going to repeat them, so you'll hear me say them again and again. But I would say one of the best things you can do is just familiarize yourself with the DNA matches page at the testing company website. So whatever company you tested with, click on all the buttons, look at all the different options, read up on what they mean and what they're trying to tell you. You can't break it. So just kind of click on things and let your curiosity run wild. You also should familiarize yourself with your individual match page. You should learn about estimated relationships. I would say just try to help you feel more comfortable with your DNA matches, try to identify some of them. So you feel confident with what you're doing there, what you're looking at. And then you can sort your matches into groups if that appeals to you. It does to me. It's an orderly sort of thing that I like to have mine sorted into groups, and I'll show you how to do that in a few minutes. So we're going to go through again and look at the four major autosomal testing companies and looking at your match page and what you can do at the match page level. So we'll start with Ancestry DNA. So again, you want to familiarize yourself with the DNA matches page. So here's my DNA matches page at Ancestry DNA. And you can see there's a lot of things to do here. There's a number of options across the top there. There's filters, there's a search box, there's a sort that you can do. And then you have the names of your matches. And you can see reading from the right to the left, they will show you if your match is male or female. My first two matches there are female. That is indicated by the way that the match icon is pink. And your male matches would be in a blue color. You have the name of your match. I have taken the names off because I don't have permission to share these names with you. And then you have the projected relationship. Then you have the family trees, and then you have the way to view the match. And over on the far right, you have a little box with a plus sign, and that's where you can add somebody to a group. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Estimated relationships. So each of the testing companies is going to make it somewhat helpful, is going to make it somewhat, give you some clues and some guidance on what you might expect this relationship to be. But you have to know where to find that information. So at Ancestry, you can see my match NG. You can see that with the red arrow that they're saying that she's my first to second cousin. And I share 369 CMs with her, and that stands for centimorgans. We'll talk about that in a minute. If I click on that 369 centimorgans, I will get this new screen that pops up here. And it says that, how do we estimate DNA relationships? And this is telling me that if you share 369 centimorgans with this person, these are the possible relationships. And this is the percentage of the time that the relationship is in this category versus the percentage of time it's in this category. So you can see that she's considered my first to second cousin. But then when you look at the list of relationships, there's like 8 different relationships that she could be with me. That's what I mean when I say you have to figure this out kind of yourself. You can't rely on the testing company to tell you because they don't know. They can just tell you that it's one of these relationships here, probably. So they don't know how exactly you're related. They're just looking at the number of centimorgans that you match with the person. And centimorgans is abbreviated as CM. And so whenever you see CM, it stands for centimorgan. And centimorgans is just the unit of measurement for DNA, scientific term. And like I said, most companies will allow you to see how they came up with that estimated relationship, just like Ancestry just did. Now, you can also use some outside tools to estimate the relationship. There's 2 of them that I'm going to speak about just briefly. One is called the Shared Centimorgan Project. This is at DNApainter.com. DNApainter.com has some free resources, and it also has a paid section. But this Shared Centimorgan Project is on the free side of the website. So you shouldn't have to pay to use this Shared Centimorgan Project. It's under tools, and you would just enter the number of centimorgans that you share, 369, or the percentage of DNA shared with a match, and they will give you a list of possible relationships ranked by probability. The other thing is the DNA Detective's green relationship chart, and you can Google this to find a copy of this online. The most likely relationships are listed on an easy-to-use chart. And it includes about 95% of the possibilities. It does not include the 5% that could be a very kind of extreme relationship, like out of the norm. So about 95% of the time, the DNA Detective's green chart would be accurate. So this is what the Shared Centimorgan Project tool looks like at DNA Painter. And so you're just going to type in the number of centimorgans up at the top there, and you will get a list of possible relationships. And this is what the DNA Detective's green chart looks like. which you read from left to right. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is you want to view your match page with an individual. So let's say you see a match listed on your match list and you say, I want to learn more about that particular person. So I decided that I want to look at this NG match a little more closely. And so on Ancestry, I just click on View Match, which is the blue button there. And this opens up a new window. This is the comparison between me and NG. There's a lot of stuff going on this page. You can do so many things. This is where I really encourage you to play with this page, because I can't explain everything that's going on this page to you right now. It's just too much. You can up here add a note. I suggest you do that. If you figure out who the person is, you can add a note to say who they are. This is where you send a message to the person. It's called messaging them. Add to group. We'll talk about that in a minute. You can see NG's ethnicity results here. You can see the shared matches between you and NG here. You can see NG's tree down here. And if you had a common ancestor hint with NG, which we'll talk about in a minute, you would see it there. Okay. Now I suggest you do try to identify your matches. So in this talk tonight, we're really just going to talk about easy matches to identify. So we're not going to do a lot of mental acrobatics here. We're just going to ease into this as easily as possible. So look at their names. Do you recognize their first name or their last name? Can you say to yourself, gee, I think there were some McGillicuddies back in my tree somewhere. So since this person is named McGillicuddy, they're probably on that side of the family. And then the other way to easily identify matches is if they do have a tree, look at their tree and you start recognizing names on their tree. And you say, oh yeah, there's that McGillicuddy name. Oh yeah, I see how they're related. And then you can also look for common ancestor hints, or you can do a little research yourself. If you see that all the people on the tree are from the same town that your grandparents lived in, but you can't quite see the connection, do a little research on their tree. Maybe you can figure it out. And then you can always Google the match's name, which sometimes gets you a lot, surprisingly, just by finding little tidbits online about them. And I would systematically work through your match list, going down to about your third to fourth cousins, trying to figure out if you can easily identify them. I would skip over the ones that you can't easily identify, if they don't have a tree, if they don't have names that you recognize. And you can come back to those matches later on as you become more skilled at working with your DNA matches. So let's work on identifying DP. So DP is one of my matches there, you can see. So we're going to view the match. And right away, I see a lot of things that help me identify DP. So one thing is that DP's tree actually has relatives on it that I recognize. This whole branch of DP's tree down at the bottom, those are all people that I know. Those are some of my relatives. So I can say, oh yeah, he's related to me on the Willison side and the Lepper side. But over here on the left, Ancestry has this helpful hint. And this is for when you have a tree and your match has a tree and you have the same ancestor found in both trees. So basically, Jason, this is telling us right here that the common ancestors that Ancestry found in my tree and DP's tree are Jason Willison and Jesse Lepper. And there may be some more possible connections, but Jason and Jesse are the main connection. And it says that we're probably second cousins because we both descend from this couple. And I can click on view the relationship to see more. And when I do that, it lays it all out for me. And this is showing how we're related through Jason, but I could do the same thing for Jesse as well. And so this is called the common ancestor hint. And it clearly lays out my tree and his tree kind of side by side. So my tree shows that I'm related to Jason Willison through his daughter, Helen, and DP is related through the daughter, Betsy. And then there's a parent here, and then there's me, and then there's DP. And this makes us second cousins, according to this chart. Now, if I had some reason to think that DP's tree was wrong, you know, that might not be the correct relationship between us. And there we do know that some of our matches have input incorrect family trees. So kind of keep an eye on that. But this is correct. I know who DP is actually. So how did I identify him? Well, for one thing, I recognized his surname of Porter. And I said to myself, I think there were some Porters in the family. And then I could ask my mom about it. I think I did. I said, do you know who DP would be? And she's like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so's, you know, so-and-so's something, you know, son. I think you met him at a family reunion. Oh, okay. And then I viewed the match and I saw the tree and the common ancestor hint. So all that together helped me put together who DP was, right? So that was kind of an easy one. Both Ancestry and MyHeritage will provide you with those DNA hints. But like I said, sometimes they're based on trees. So you might believe that your tree is extremely accurate, but you know nothing about your match and how accurate his or her tree might be. So you might get a common ancestor hint based on an erroneous tree from somebody else. So if you think their tree looks dubious, do some research, double check it. You can usually backtrack and verify people's trees yourself. And so, like I said, if you think that something looks off, just research it. After you make an identification, I suggest you make notes about it for your own future reference and create a group. So in Ancestry and MyHeritage, you can create a group for the common ancestor couple that you share with that match. And that's how I group my matches, is by common ancestor couple. You can do it differently. I know a lot of people do it by surname, but I do it by the married couple. And that just makes more sense to me. So on the match page with DP, remember I showed you there was a spot to add a note. So if you click on add note, you can see this note box will come up and you can write in there all the information about that person. And I find it best to write down all the different generations, because if I think that I might forget that information in the future, it's just best to write it down. If I've figured out exactly who DP is, then I need to write it all in there because I'll forget somehow. And so you do that in the notes, and then here's where you add to a group. So this is Ancestry, you add to group, and then you create a group. And you can name the group whatever you want it. So I'm naming it after the most recent common ancestor couple, which was Jason Willison and Jessie Lepper, my great-grandparents. They're also DP's great-grandparents, and that's the couple that we intersect on. So I call the group that, and I assign it a color, and I save it, and then I add DP to that group, and it looks like that. Now he has a yellow dot after his name, and you can see it here on the match page. So this is the main match page again, and now DP has a little yellow dot over here towards the far right of your match page. And this is where you can see where you categorize people. So then you just continue going through your matches and continue doing this, placing the ones you can identify into groups. And so that's Ancestry DNA. Now we're going to move on to MyHeritage, which has a lot of the same features. So you're going to do the same steps at MyHeritage. You're going to familiarize yourself with the features of the website. You're going to learn about estimated relationships. You're going to identify known matches and sort them into groups. So this is what your DNA matches look like at MyHeritage. And you can see they call it your DNA matches right here. And again, I've privatized the names of the people so you can't see them. And again, there's a lot of things for you to click on. And these little question marks here, those are going to open up and give you more information. So be sure you click on those. There's filters, there's sorting, there's a search box over here along the top. And so just a lot to familiarize yourself with. So you can't break it. So just look at the different options and see what this page is really trying to tell you. Now, you can see here that MJ is one of my matches and the estimated relationship. And I love that MyHeritage clearly states that this is an estimated relationship. They're saying that she could be my grandmother, my half sister, or my aunt. And then they have a little question mark. When you click on that question mark, you will get this chart here that kind of places MJ and you on a family tree and shows you the different options for how you could be related. So that's a nice feature that MyHeritage has that kind of helps you try to visualize what the relationship might be. So when you want to view a match, we're going to look at SN here for a minute, and we want to do review DNA match. So when you do that, a whole new screen opens up, and on MyHeritage, it's a scrolling screen. So I'm showing you basically the top of that screen, but you keep scrolling down and down, further down on the match page, and there's more and more information. So remember to scroll down. So with the MyHeritage match page, they are doing kind of a split screen where my information is over on the left and the matches information is over on the right. So there's my name there, and then underneath that are my ancestral surnames. And so these are things that I entered into MyHeritage and told them that these are my ancestral surnames. And then this is some information about my match. This is where I can contact her, the big purple button, send her a message. I can add a note up at the top. I can view her tree. I can also view her tree below. But these are the surnames that she entered. So under her name, the surnames that are listed under her name are her surnames. And then they're next to my surname. So you can kind of compare and contrast. And this down here is her tree. And like I said, there's more information if you keep scrolling. All right. Now, MyHeritage also provides you with hints based on your tree and the matches tree. So if they find that you both have the same ancestor in your tree, again, they're going to give you a hint about it. At MyHeritage, they call it the theory of relativity. And again, the trees can be wrong. So sometimes your theory of relativity is wrong. But this is what it looks like when it gives you a theory of relativity. So SK over here, and then down here, it says SK is your third cousin according to the theory of family relativity. So then if you want to view the theory, you can go and open up the new screen to view it. And this is basically just your common ancestor hint, but they don't call it that because that's what Ancestry calls it. So they call theirs a theory of family relativity. But it's basically the same thing. So here we have information from SK's tree, and we have on the right, and on the left, we have the information from my tree. And basically, they're showing us that John Lepper and Nancy Allen are our common ancestors. So they're the shared ancestor couple. And SK comes down from their son, Ellis, Ellis. And I come down from the son, John Lepper the third. This should say John Lepper the third. And I come over here and there's me. So that's how, based on our trees, that they think that SK and I are related. And I, again, concur with what they say. I think SK's tree is right. I know who SK is as well. And so then back on the match page, I can add over here a note. You can see it there on the left. Looks like some little scribbling. You click on that and I can make a note of who SK is. And again, I have changed this information. This is not her real name or anything like that. And then I can add her to a group, just like I could do at Ancestry. And that is the button right up there at the very top by the red arrow. If I click on that button, they call it a label. And the labels are basically the color coding the same way that you could do at Ancestry. So you manage your labels, you create a new label. And remember, I'm naming my groups after the shared ancestor couple. So I'm calling this group John Lepper and Hannah Allen because that was our shared ancestor couple. And assign it to a color. And then they get the color, looks like maybe brown or orange, dark orange, and apply. And so then that color is going to show up next to SK's name on my match list. And I'm going to know that she is related to me through that couple. So let's move on to 23andMe. And we follow the same steps at 23andMe. So this is just a repeat slide, just to kind of cement it in your mind what it is that I'm having you do. So at 23andMe, your DNA matches are called DNA relatives. And you can see that it's very similar to the others. You've got some filters, you've got some sorting, you got some different buttons that you can click on, you can star things. But 23andMe has some fewer tools than some of the other companies do. Now, when I want to look at a match, I'm looking at my match with DR, and it is telling me that I have, that I could be second cousins. And then I will click on that and it opens up this little thing here and it tells me I share 85 centimorgans with him. That's way down at the way bottom. And it says predicted relationship, but that's in very small letters. And most people are misunderstanding this at 23andMe. I've had a lot of people contact me and say, 23andMe says that so-and-so is my first cousin, but I don't think they can be. And I'll say, no, in very small letters, it says that's the predicted relationship. So again, this is just a prediction and it's something that you have to figure out for yourself exactly what the relationship is. They've drawn you a little diagram here of showing you what a second cousin would look like. But if you plug this 85 centimorgans into the DNA painter site that I showed you earlier, it would not be a second cousin. It would be more like a third cousin or a second cousin once removed. Okay, if you go ahead and click on the matches names, you get into the match page between you and the match. This is between me and DR. And again, on 23andMe, that page, you scroll down and down and down. So there's a lot more that I'm not showing you. But you keep scrolling down on the match page and you can see more and more information comparing you and DR. So DR has put in some information about himself. He's put in that he was born in 58. He's from Carmel, Indiana. This is where I would message him right here. I could send him a message. And this DR is in your family tree. This is not a tree that I created. This is a 23andMe tree, and I'll show you the 23andMe tree in a minute, but it's not really, well, you'll have to see it to believe it. You'll just have to see it to believe it. Okay. Family background, you can see that here it's showing mine and then it's showing DR's next to each other. So maternal grandmother's birthplace, maternal grandfather's birthplace, and you read it across. And then family surnames. I have input some family surnames. I don't know why they're not showing up there, but DR has also input some family surnames. And on this list, I can see that one of his family surnames is Allen, and that his family is from Indianapolis, Marion County, Indiana, as is part of my family. And so I believe from all this information here that I can identify that he's on my father's side of the family, because my father is an Allen and his family is from Indianapolis. So most likely DR is a relative of mine on my father's side of the family. Now, the speculative tree. So this is the 23andMe tree. And they're basically placing your DNA matches on a tree and showing you which side of the family they're on. So there's me here, and then there's my parents, and this is my mom, and this is my dad. So they're putting these 4 matches on my dad's side of the tree. And they're showing me a possible way that I could be related to them through this graph. But this is all very speculative, and it's just based on algorithms behind the scenes, computer algorithms trying to sort out my matches from my father's side versus my mother's side, and then showing approximately how I might be related to the different matches. But I can edit this tree if I want to. I can correct it if it's wrong, but it's a speculative tree meant to be of help to me. But a lot of people take it as the gospel truth, and you don't want to do that either. You just want to look at it and say, oh, well, that's interesting. This could be how I'm related to some of these people. So 23andMe doesn't really allow you to submit your own family tree on the site. There's a way to link your tree to another site, but I have hardly seen anybody use that tool. So, and there's no way to create groups of matches. So it's a harder site to work with than some of the others. So I would suggest, if you want to keep notes about your 23andMe matches and you want to sort them into groups, that you do it on a spreadsheet or a pen and paper, because that's really the best way to keep track of your 23andMe matches and what you've learned about them, because there's not a really good way of doing it within the 23andMe website. So the last company is Family Tree DNA, and this is the Family Finder test that we're looking at, because they offer several tests. So you want to do the same beginner steps that we did with the other companies. And this is what your match page looks like. And they call it Family Finder matches, which are basically your cousin matches. And it's pretty much set up the same way. There's a lot of tools on this site to work with again. So not as sparse as 23andMe was. You have a search button up here. You got some sorts. You can export. You can filter. You can do some different table views and so forth. And then there's a lot of things to click on and look at on the page with the match list. So one of the first things you want to do is just familiarize yourself with that. Now, if I wanted to learn more about this match, LR, I would click on the name LR. And you can see that the relationship range over here, 150 centimorgans is our shared DNA. And they've given us a pretty broad spectrum of a relationship. We could be second cousins, we could be fourth cousins. And what I would do is probably throw this into DNA Painter in the Shared Centimorgan project to get an idea of what 150 centimorgans would look like, as far as what kind of relationship it could be. But on the match page between me and LR, I get LR's email address down here. This is the only company that gives me the actual email address of my match, so that I can write them an email outside of the testing company website. This is also where I could add notes, and I can see LR's ancestral surname. So LR has typed in all these surnames, and so I can read those there. I can also see LR's tree, and that little squiggly thing right up there by the red arrow is the symbol for the tree. And if I click on that, it opened up and showed me her tree. And on this tree, I very easily saw a common ancestor couple. So my third great grandparents are listed there, James White and Tacey Smith. And I think that they're also LR's third great grandparents. So we would actually be third cousins according to this chart. So this is where I would write my note. Again, when I'm clicking on my match with LR, there's a place to write a note. I can write in there how I'm related to LR based on the tree that I just saw. But I cannot create a group again for these matches. There's no grouping function at Family Tree DNA. Fewer people have uploaded their trees, but some have, and LR had done so, and it was a very helpful tree to me. So there's no way to create groups of matches. So again, you want to keep paper notes or a spreadsheet of your Family Tree DNA matches so that you know how you're related to these people. Okay, now this is just a quick like ending sort of piece of information for you. So how are people using autosomal DNA in their genealogical research? Well, different people are using it in different ways. One way would be that you can confirm your genealogical ancestor couples genetically. If you find that you have a number of DNA matches that descend from that couple, then you know that your family tree research is being backed up by DNA. And you want to utilize genealogical records and DNA to find your ancestors. And this is a great test. The autosomal DNA test is a great test for adoptees to use to help find their birth family, even though we didn't cover that topic in this presentation. So this is what I mean by verifying your genealogical tree. So here's my genealogical tree. This is what I put together based on what I know about my family and the genealogical records that I've been able to uncover. And you can see there that I'm highlighting over in the red box a set of my second great grandparents, George Brown and Sarah Kennedy. This is on my father's side of the family. Now, how do I know that those are really my second great grandparents, genetically speaking? Well, I've got these paper records, these genealogical records that tell me that they are, on paper, my second great grandparents. But when I couple it with my DNA results, I can be more confident that my research is correct. And so here's a page from my DNA matches over at Ancestry. And at the top, you can see the couple, George Brown and Sarah Kennedy, and you can see that they had a number of children. They had a Stella, Ida, May, and Harvey. They had Albert, they had Alice, they had Fred, and they had James. And I have 4 DNA matches to different descendants of this couple. So I have 2 DNA matches coming off of Fred. I have 1 DNA match, Jay, coming from James Presley Brown. And I have 1 coming from Albert Brown down here. And then I come from Alice. So you can see me at the bottom there. So having 4 DNA matches to descendants of this couple, and they're all, you know, from these different siblings of Alice. This is making me feel pretty confident that I have the correct couple as Alice's parents, because I'm matching with descendants of her brothers and sisters. And that's why we share DNA. That's why we're DNA matches, because we descend from the same ancestor couple, George and Sarah. So that is one way of using your autosomal DNA to kind of verify people on your tree. So I hope that gives you some inspiration as we close our talk tonight. So in conclusion, I want you to really start playing around with your results, clicking on buttons, seeing what they do, have fun with it, read the information and help screen on each of the company's websites, and get started with working with your autosomal DNA matches.
All right. Well, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Bye.
Bye.